Good day, beloved. Welcome to another episode of The VUU. Today we will be honoring and talking about the Transgender Day of Remembrance with two special guests. But first, let us introduce ourselves and give you a few minutes to settle into being here with us. Once again, I'm Michael Tino, part of the lead ministry team of the Church of the Larger Fellowship, coming to you from Peekskill, New York, a little bit north of New York City, where it is fall and it is cold and it is fine and the world is on fire as it is everywhere. And my child is making lots of noise in the other room, and I hope you don't hear her. Her school was let out early because of a COVID case, and so she has nothing to do right now while I'm on the view. How are you, Quiana?
I am well. This is one of those busier weeks in my life that I excited about because there's like amazing things like the VUU happening. I call it the VUU because that's that Midwest accent for you. Um, and I didn't plan a lot of space to take rest and to like process. So I'm trying to fit those in now, kind of like socks on a line. Like, ooh, what can I make fit so that I get what I need to keep going? The weather here in Michigan, although it's cool, it is beautiful. It's very pre-snow. Yesterday when I was walking, I saw a couple of little snowflakes trying to manifest their hopes and dreams, but they didn't make it to the ground, and I was very okay with that. Um, so they were dreamers, and I expect the dream. So I'm a little sad. I'm not sure that I'll get out to do a walk today in this weather, but I'm definitely appreciating the transition that's in front of us with the weather between fall and winter, and excited to be witnessing it. I want to hear about Seattle. How's it going in Seattle?
Hello, Quiana. I'm Aisha Hauser, and I am in Seattle, Washington. And as you were talking, Quiana, I was thinking Quiana needs to write a poem about lost dreams of snowflakes. So I just want to invite you to maybe maybe I'll write it. I don't know. I'm not a great poet, but you're a much better poet than I am. So yes, I'm in Seattle. The weather today is overcast. Yesterday and the day before, we had wind and rainstorms. Let me tell you, I do not complain about the rain. We need water. Humanity needs water, so the rain genuinely doesn't bother me. And I like the sun too. I mean, I have nothing against the sun. So I'm happy to be here on the VUU. I love Quiana and the VUU. That's awesome. And what do we have Tanner Linden. How are you, Tanner? The tech director, our producer of the VUU, Tanner Linden.
Hi all, I'm Tanner. I run tech for the VUU and do outreach for the Church of the Larger Fellowship. I will be moving your comments from YouTube chat into Zoom so that our wonderful hosts and guests can see them. So please comment in the YouTube chat and I will make sure that we try to get your questions answered. And I will pass it back to Michael to introduce our guests.
Thank you, Tanner, and dream on, little snowflake, dream on. So before we introduce our guests today, we like to just spend a few minutes thinking about what's going on in the greater world of Unitarian Universalism. At the Church of the Larger Fellowship, we are gearing up for a fun end of the year. So look for our year-end fun calendar, community calendar that Tanner is busy putting together as we speak. And also, we are putting out a call for help. Every year, we do a program where we send cards to our incarcerated Unitarian Universalist members. And for those of you who don't know, CLF serves at current over 1,250 incarcerated Unitarian Universalists are members of Church of the Larger Fellowship. And as we all know, the prison industrial system dehumanizes them on a daily basis. And so anything that we can bring a little bit of humanity and a little bit of wonder and beauty into their lives is greatly appreciated. Unfortunately, some parts of what the prison system does is they don't let people send cards anymore. Like You can't send glitter, you can't send color, you can't send prettiness. It's like, it boggles the mind. And with COVID happening, we can't throw a big party in Boston, which is what we do every year, for all of the Unitarian Universalists in Boston to come and address envelopes to our incarcerated members and send them notes and things. So we need help from Unitarian Universalists all over the world. And if you would like to send cards to incarcerated, or send notes, really, it's not really cards, to incarcerated Unitarian Universalists, we will send you a template to print out with a beautiful design designed by our very own Rose Gallagly. And you can print them out and write a little note on them, and we will send you addresses and instructions. Tanner is going to put the link to how to do that, how to sign up for that. We need people to sign up for 1,200 folks. So just to be clear, if you can do 10, if you can do 5, if you can do 2, we love you, and we'll send you.
Or Michael, if a whole congregation can do it, maybe a congregation can sponsor 200.
And if your congregation won't take on 200, Ann Arbor.
I was just writing that down. Oh my gosh, I was like, who are my groups? Restorative justice. Like, all of my mind just went to who are the groups I could focus this at, because yeah, that's my job. Congregational life. What?
There we go. So
I'm on the mission.
We want congregations, other congregations, to connect with this ministry, this prison ministry that we do, that we call Worthy Now, because we need to constantly be reminding our incarcerated members that they are worthy of our love, and they are worthy just as they are, because they are constantly told otherwise by the system that they're in. What else is going on in the UU Roundup? Quiana,
I just want to give a shout out. I've been watching the Liberal Religious Educator page on Facebook, that folks are now thinking of virtual pageants for the holiday. So just a shout out. I neglected to mention that I am part of the co-lead ministry team of the Church of Larger Fellowship. So we're exclusively online, and I did work for 3 brick and mortar congregations where we had pageants. So my heart and compassion and glitter wishes for creativity, they'll be great and they'll be what they are. But I just, my heart just went, oh my goodness, I forgot all about holiday pageants that now have to be done on Zoom, and it'll happen. I just want to give a shout out, and I'm thinking of you. So I kind of can't wait to see them. can't wait to see what our folks come up with on Zoom.
Yeah, sending out a lot of love to our people who are navigating the holiday season in ways that are safe, because we're distant from each other, and we're used to that.
The only thing I have on my radar in terms of upcoming UU happenings is Drum is holding a service. Now you see me, ask me a question. Now my AARP battery done went out and I can't remember. They're holding a service, I believe, on November 29th. So if you are a part of Drum, or you're a person of color and you are in the UU realm of communication, it's definitely a link that you can find online that folks are definitely circulating and inviting folks to be in sacred space.
Can you say what Drum is?
No, because I don't want to mess it up. Diverse, revolutionary, Unitarian Universalism, multicultural, and then stuff.
Multicultural ministries.
Oh, I was so close. I let. So yeah, so it is the space where I can say non-white UUs congregate and come together to be in community and to live out this faith. So if that is how you identify, then you are called to be there, and Drum welcomes you with open arms.
Thank you.
I think this leans right into a couple of things that are happening in particular. So can we just jump in? Can we do that?
Yes, please. Let's introduce our guests. Why don't you do that, Quiana?
That would be okay. I can make that happen. So, as you know, our show's a little fly by our pants, and we're okay with that. It leaves a lot of room for us to be expansive. we wanted to use our time and our platform today to honor the Trans Day of Remembrance. And we've been able to find two amazing folks who are willing to be in this dialogue with us to lead us while we follow. First and foremost, I want to introduce Jess. Jess is a religious educator and librarian who is currently serving with Michael. Can you say Michael's last name for me, Jess, so I don't mess it up?
Servetus.
Thank you. Unitarian Society in Fridley, Minnesota. That's my hometown. Big up Frids. Fridley, Minneapolis, not Fridley, let's be clear. And then the mission is to invite connection, inspire spiritual growth, lean into curiosity, and ignite action in the world where everything is an opportunity for faith formation. We are also excited to have Reverend Sean Parker Dennison, who serves the Rogue Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Ashland, Oregon. He came out as trans while in seminary in 1997 and was ordained in 2000. He is also the author of Breaking and Blessings, the 2020 In Spirit Book of Meditations. We welcome you both to the table, and we honor tomorrow as a day of Actually, my first question really is for Sean. When I asked Sean if they could be a part of this panel, they called me to task, and I welcome that invitation. Can you speak to what you asked of us that I think is just a beautiful invite to start?
Sure. So from my bio, you can tell I've been in the ministry biz for a while, and I came out almost 25 years ago as a trans man. So lots of experience, I guess, many years of Trans Day of Remembrance. And for many of those years, I was asked by different congregations or community groups to lead the service. Would you please create and lead a Trans Day of Remembrance service? Which for a long time I did, because it was the one shot we had to do some education and to get trans stories out there. But unfortunately, it's a day that, while really important to memorialize those who were killed for being trans, sort of perpetuates the idea that the life of transgender people is tragic. So now when I accept an invitation, it's on the condition that there be another show or event, usually about 6 months offset, that really showcases the lives and resilience and work and creativity and joy and love of trans people. Because while I'm not denigrating Trans Day of Remembrance, it's not enough. It's not sufficient to only remember the trans folks who mostly were murdered. That's mostly what TDOR does. Then we have, lots of stories of folks who took their own lives that add to the numbers. But what we don't hear a lot about, although we're getting more of it, is the creativity, love, life, joy, fun of transness and being a trans person. So I always ask now, please commit to another show in the spring, probably, that showcases all that good stuff.
Quiana, you're muted.
Yes, I want to thank you for that invite, because it made me have to pause and be present about not only acknowledging the loss of life, but the love of life that is on the other spectrum, that is required. We can't acknowledge your death if we're not going to acknowledge your life. To me, I think that's just so absolutely beautiful. And I wanted to thank you for that invite. Jess, I want to bring you into the conversation. Can you talk a little bit about how this day works and feels for you and how you experience it?
Sure. I'll give a little bit of background of how I come into the conversation. My child started transitioning at 4, and everyone was all, it's a phase. Well, the phase didn't end, and she's a beautiful, amazing human, and her just vigor for life and authenticity in herself kind of inspired me. And probably 3 or 4 years after she really, embraced, we talked about what being transgender was and what that meant and what that might mean for her. And she was like, yeah, that's totally what I am.
it really inspired me to look inside myself. And I, at 35 came out, and then at 39 or 40 realized, I might be non-binary. And then at 40, 41 was like, I might be really kind of leaning more towards trans man. So it's all a journey, and it was inspired by my child. And so this day has always kind of been a special moment for me and her to bond and talk about the life and the consequences. Well, not consequences, but like the other side of things, and kind of have honest conversations and be able to talk with each other.
I'm thinking of my next question, y'all. I have to think, but if other folks have questions, please throw them on the floor. I can think of more too. Aisha, Michael, Sean, Jess, is there anything you all want to add?
And Jess, you noted in the chat that there's a trans and non-binary UU gathering on Tuesday. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. This summer at GA, we held a worship service for trans and non-binary UUs that was outside of Trust, that was for, open to everyone. And it was amazing, and it was wonderful, and it was beautiful. And we got a lot of feedback, which we had constantly heard, to have more of it. And so the UUA really put their money where their mouth is. And we have Adrian, who is doing a wonderful job of gathering people. And we had our first meeting last month, and it was a wonderful space for people to just be and feel safe and welcome. And the next one is now Tuesday, the 24th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. It's open to children, adults, families. It's awesome.
Jess said outside of Trust, and for those of you who don't know, Trust is Transgender Religious Professionals UUs Together, which Mr. Barb Grieve and I founded long ago, long ago, and both of us have now been able to move off the steering committee, which is great, and there's a whole new group of people. Trust is the acronym for that, and it is just for religious professionals. So this gathering that Jess is describing is for all transgender UUs. So it's a big step finally to get ministry beyond the religious leaders who couldn't sustain and uphold the whole trans community while we were trying to make progress in our own professional lives. And so this is great. And I'm so glad the UUA has finally taken it on. And we know there are a lot of trans UUs out there who could benefit from the support and the connection and the joy of being together. So I'm really happy about that. But I did, outside of Trust sounded funny if you didn't know what Trust meant in the form of an acronym.
And we have a question from McKay Julia, or maybe that's Julia McKay. What is the focus of that space? I don't know if any of us are involved in planning that, but
I can answer a little bit because I am involved in planning.
Thank you.
The theme for next week is welcoming, affirming each other. The focus is kind of being present with each other. We try to have an opening and a closing. We have some music, and it's a space to share. And we usually have some guiding questions to talk about it. And so next week's theme is welcoming and affirming each other.
Thank you. So, Aisha, go ahead.
Well, no, I just wanted to add, one of the things that I know that I've observed is how long it has taken for congregations to call trans and non-binary ministers. So, Sean, would you kind of reflect on what do you think changed? That I think it was, I want to say that Keith Cron, who's in the transitions office, 1 year posted, maybe it was a couple years ago, that it was the most amount of trans and non-binary ministers invited to candidate for settled ministry, and not interim, but settled. So what do you think changed? What are some of the things that were put in place, and what needs to be done more so that there is support and joy along with to kind of mitigate the difficulties and the challenges?
So while Unitarian Universalists love to think we're really far ahead of the curve on these things, we generally aren't. So what has actually changed is society, and Unitarian Universalism reflects that. And it has changed in some very specific ways. First of all, visibility. People now know they know trans people. When I started, I can't tell you how many times I heard, "Oh, you're the first transgender person I've ever met." So some of it is just that our culture has shifted so that among the liberal leaning folks, they know trans people, they've interacted with trans people, they've had a good experience often with trans people. However, while it's true, I think we had 5. I think we have a total of either 6 or 7 settled trans ministers now. It's still a complicated thing. So one of the things I learned is it's really different to have trans folks in your congregation than to have a trans minister for people. And this is true of basically any marginalized identity. It's the working of white supremacy, really, white supremacy culture writ large, that it's okay if you take up space in the pew and sit quietly, maybe even, volunteer, do a few things, lead the trans group, do a workshop for the children. But if you're going to lead the congregation, people still think it's a risk to have a trans minister. That somehow that's going to point out their values in the world, which you'd think would be a good thing, but there's a lot of what will people in our town think. There's a lot of, will you have the support in my small town where my UU congregation is located? It's a very, do you know how to do pastoral care with people who aren't trans? I always tease with that one, like marital counseling is great because I've been a man and a woman, so I can talk about both sides of the gender issue. So I talk a little bit about, even in my congregation now where I've been, this is my 4th year here, that Trans 101, we finally have gotten to, which is, oh, you're trans and you're not any different than anybody else. So you can be our minister. But we haven't gotten to Trans 201, which is you're trans and you bring particular gifts to the ministry that we want and need in our leadership. And again, that's true across all variables that are judged as different, whether that's ableism, sexism, racism, transphobia, homophobia, it all comes out. But we haven't really moved as Unitarian Universalists past, okay, you're okay because you're enough like us. And that's when sometimes people ask me, why did we make progress more quickly on GLBT issues, which, there's an assumption that all of those are the same thing in that comment, but they're not. But we have taken so long with race. And for me, it's because the GLBT people were already in our congregations. And for the most part, they just came out to us and were like, oh, you're just like us. And across, even though our people of color were also in our congregations, they were often in our congregations as children first, and they were never given that same welcome. They're still seen as other, something different. So we're working, the same mechanisms of oppression are still at work, and we can learn from each other. That's one of the great things, is we can apply what we've learned in one area to other areas. But yeah, we are making progress, but we are not as far ahead of the curve as Unitarian Universalists like to think we are. We're seeing more and more trans people in leadership in entertainment, the arts, education. So we're just following that same curve.
And I just want to point out something that's important that I even heard in Seattle, because I also would fall into the LGBTQ, and I said something about Seattle being great on LGBT, and then someone said to me, Seattle's not great on the T, like that's still behind the curve. LG and B, but the trans issues aren't quite as far along. And I appreciate you lifting up, Sean, that Unitarian Universalism did not lead progress for trans issues. It happened after society did. So that's I just want to lift that up, that Unitarian Universalism is still behind, and I want to make sure that point is not lost. So thank you.
Well, I think if we'd been ahead, one of the things that I tend to be super positive and I forget to tell the hard parts of the story. But, when I was in Search in 2000, if we'd been ahead, it wouldn't have taken me 3 years and 16 congregations turning me down before I finally got my first call. And that first call was even, the wheels were greased by relationship, right? So I took a church that my intern supervisor had served. So they trusted me through her ministry, not, so that they had a little extra oomph to say, oh, well, if this person trusts Sean, Sean's probably okay. But if we'd been ahead of the curve 20 years ago, that wouldn't have happened. So we're just marching right along to the same beat as society. And sometimes when it comes to ministry, we're even a little bit behind because people like to explain what they know about transness in a way that they don't even notice denigrates or dismisses the lived experience of trans people.
Can I ask Jess, just to make sure we're making the conversation round, to speak to some of what Sean was just saying, and particularly what you said caught me and then it ran away. I'll just be back over here. But just I think I was just thinking about what are some of those microaggressions or things that folks do that there's this front, yes, you can be here kind of, what are things that let you know and they're doing theory, not practicum yet?
Yeah, and if it catches back up to you, pop back in. I wanted to extend that to religious educators, not having that same welcome and having that similar struggle with an even limited scope of where they can go to serve. They're kind of where we are often location specific. We don't relocate for our jobs. I did that, moved from Florida to Minnesota recently, and it was kind of, very shocking. And I think from what I hear, a lot of religious educators, because that's the kind of experience that I can bring as far as microaggressions, it becomes very tokenized. Well, we have our religious educator who's non-binary or who's trans or who's a member of trust, so we're good. We don't need to do any further work. And the questions get brought, is this okay? Is that okay? Which on one hand, I'm thankful that the questions are brought, so that we're presenting a radically inclusive message implicitly and explicitly in what congregations put out. And also that information is available for people that want to seek it. It doesn't need to come from the one friend you have.
Do you think that some of our progress as Unitarian Universalists also has to do with just sheer number of transgender religious professionals in our movement now? I mean, I know that as a new member of Trust, I know that the membership in Trust has exploded in recent years as more folks who are religious professionals come out and as more trans folks go into being religious professionals. So there's a certain amount of you get to a number at which you can't stop the tide in a certain way. Do you think that that's part of it too, Jess or Sean?
I do. I think it's similar to congregational size. They get to a certain size and now you're beyond a family congregation and you have a whole different mindset that you need to approach things with. I think it also comes with our youth. large amount of youth that are in a society, as Sean pointed out, that supports them and lifts them up. And we support and lift up our youth. And I think that the number is also reflective there.
I'm gonna move us into a different direction because I want to name and own two things that we're doing, and it's no one's fault. We are here for the Trans Day of Remembrance, and it is a somber moment. Somewhere between 36 and what did we say, 47 folks have lost their lives in the last year just for being trans. And I want to call that. I want to name it. I want to say it out loud that people are dying for owning for being their most authentic self. And a large proportion of those folks have Black and brown skin. And I want to name that. I don't want to dance around it. I don't want to play. I want to be in it. Because if we don't, then we're participating in a cycle of harm, I think. So hold that with me. I know as a Black person, February comes and everybody wants my time. As a queer person, June comes, everybody wants my time. It would have been my preference to make sure that there was a person of color on this panel. And I apologize if Sean or Jess identify as a person of color. I do apologize. I'm working on that. Damn. So, and so I wanted to just say that for me, it's hard to have this conversation and not have the representation. But I also know that if you are a Black trans person right now, you could have been paid every day this week, twice a day, to be on a panel, to speak and to be present and to be a part of those dialogues. And those folks get tired and need space to rest. So I say to you, how do you live your life in its fullest, most authentic self, knowing that you're taking breath and being your most full self is hard for people, that it strikes violence in people. And I'm not trying to scare you or scare the community that we're speaking to, but on so many visceral levels for me, is how do we process that this list exists, that we have to acknowledge it and still live every day?
I think, you brought up the question of microaggressions, and there's a connected thread for me about just living with a constant understanding that there are people who would want you dead, right? It's kind of like an ongoing microaggression, or maybe not even micro, right? And it's one of the things that both makes being trans exhausting and hard, and being brave enough to live as you are, even though that's true, is a source of power and joy. And it goes back and forth. There are people in Unitarian Universalism who wish I didn't exist. There are the J.K. Rowling fans. There are the people who don't like that gender, that you can mess around with gender, because they think they have very strict categories, and how could you move from one to the other? And one of the first comments I ever got was about going over to the enemy from female to male. So and I want to totally acknowledge that as a white trans guy, my risk factors are way lower than for Black trans women. And this is one of the places where we should start to understand intersectionality, right? In order to minister or to be present with our trans siblings and non-binary siblings, we have to understand that when you carry any marginalized identity, if you add brown or Black skin to that, it suddenly becomes way more deadly, way more risky. And so, we have a chance to learn as we notice. And I'm so glad that you brought us back sort of to the point, Quiana. Thank you. We have a chance to learn and observe some truth here that isn't easy to sit with, but that if we're going to be effective at upholding our principles and living into Unitarian Universalist theologies, or theologies as I like to call them, we have to notice, we have to stop right now and notice that 36 to 47, we have two different number sources, lives were snuffed out, were taken. That's what's true. That's what we're here to notice. And we need to feel it and grieve it and hold it and let it empower us to do the right thing.
On what you said really resonated with me, that the carrying both the grief and the heaviness and the fear, and also the power in it. And as someone who's also a parent, carrying that for my child is very difficult. And as someone who lives in a rural, more red area, my child lives in Florida in a very red area, it's a lot. And then on top of that, I have the privilege of my child is white.
Sean, you called, thank you, Jess. And thank you, Sean. You both called in a little bit of that, like intersectionality and understanding that your whiteness intersects with your trans identity. Can you all talk about I'm trying to use all these really big words, but I guess I just want either of you to be able to speak to what does that mean in the work that you do? Because I think when you're in UU spaces, you're also called to address racial justice, to address some other intersections. And how does that all play out? Is it positive? Is it negative? Are you able to speak up to racial injustice? Are you able to speak to other injustices, immigration or other social justice work? And how does all of that intersect with who you are as a person and how you live out your life? Very vague question. Work with it.
Well, I have an answer that maybe is that question, maybe is a different question. But I like to, well, don't like to, but I often tell a story because we talk about spheres of influence and who's going to listen to our message. And I tell a story about when I first came out. It was right before the Pulse shooting. And so I was in a rural area in Florida when we got the news and was going out to celebrate with my partner at the time. And all of a sudden became hyper aware of everything we did. I was very female presenting at the time, so I felt relatively safe that we could be seen as friends. But I was hyper aware of, did I open the door and hold it for her? Do we sit next to each other or across from each other? Do we, did I look her in the eye? Did I just say, love you? Did I just call her babe? Like all of these things I became hyper aware of. And I tell that story and people feel empathetic and they understand it. And I say, and because I was female presenting, because I had white skin, nobody paid any attention. And while I was hyper aware, it wasn't picked up on. And so that's something that people of color experience all day, every day. And it's kind of a light bulb connection, that intersectionality of what my experience that they can understand, and now an experience that they weren't able to get to before. And so I think I bring that in a lot with talking about my experiences and how I interpreted them and how I have an understanding of maybe what white folks can understand to extend it into what people of color. And I tell them, and it was an eye-opening moment for me that is, I will never understand what it means to be a person of color, because I thought I understood what it meant to be an ally. I thought I understood what it meant to be gay in the world. And then I experienced that moment and that hypersensitivity. And it was like, that was the day my commitment to dismantling white supremacy culture began, was that moment.
Yeah, my experience is really similar to that. I I think because I came out so long ago now, the other piece that is true for me is that within Unitarian Universalism, the other community, the communities of people of color, disabled people, they became my support, and they are the first folks that took me in. It wasn't as easy as, all the powerful white men in Unitarian Universalism were like, "Hey, Sean, now you're one of us." No, it didn't work that way. What happened is that the folks of color, the disabled folks, some folks in the GLBT community, not all, the queerest of the queer, they were my first family in Unitarian Universalism and my first support. And so I also had the privilege of learning about those lives through real relationship that they offered me. So my whiteness was less of a barrier because I was seen also as someone who was fighting for inclusion and a power and a space and joy and a place within Unitarian Universalism. So I'm really grateful to those communities. And they were kind of fledgling communities at the time too, in a way, but we stuck together. And I just feel so much gratitude for that. And I try to bring that into everything that I do. So in my congregation, we have 2 different groups doing work against white supremacy, beginners group, and now we have a second group. We don't know what to call them yet. And so we started with several of the popular books, and one of them is White Fragility, which is by a white person and has its own issues. So I decided that I wanted them to read the book Centering right beside that, so that they had the voices of Unitarian Universalists of color in the room too. And I was able to say to them, when you read this book, you remember that these are my friends. These are the people. These are my family. These are my people. So don't pretend that it's some faraway place in Unitarian Universalism or somebody we don't know very well, or that would never happen here. So there's that connection gives me a lot of ways to approach intersectionality, the totality of all the ways that white supremacy is at work, which is trying to control gender, which is trying to control bodies, which is trying to control who is healthy and who is not, like all these hierarchies, and weave that understanding together in a way that I watch light bulbs go off sometimes. Oh, that is like that. Oh, you've felt that. You've been through that this matters. So they're not able to keep it so distant.
I wanted to lean into a little bit. Michael, nope. Michael, tag you're it. Nope.
No, I wanted to wrap up that question, and then you can lean into something else. But I feel like wherever we find a source of empathy for other people, it's a good thing. And as both Jess and Sean have made abundantly clear in what they've shared, all of us need to understand what the limitations of our own sources of empathy are. And so as a white person, I also will never understand what the experience of a person of color is in this society. And there are elements of my identity that sometimes open a door to empathy. And it might be a little crack of a door as someone who walks through the world with the presentation that I have. So I feel like it's good to say, yes, you're allowed to feel that empathy. And it always needs to be put into a container of realize the limitations of it. Realize constantly the limitations of it. So Quiana, you wanted to lead in a different direction, so please let us.
I'm fast moving. I hope that's okay with folks. Janine, our lovely bestie in Arizona, was letting us know about the collective. I want to make sure I say the name of their work correctly. Transforming Hearts Collective. And so, as much as we have internal work to do and internal ways that we have to do some work, I really love the Transforming Hearts Collective work around working with congregations. Do either of you know a little bit more about them or can speak to some of the congregational level transformation or dialogue that's happening? Because as much as we have to make sure we're ready to support and welcome trans clergy, we also have to be ready and able to support trans congregational members. The work has to happen in many places. So if somebody wants to speak to that, I'm here for it.
Well, I can start. Maybe we should reach out to Alex Capitan, Michael Slack, and Elena, who are the Transforming Hearts Collective, the heart of the Transforming Hearts Collective, to be on the VUU or the VUU even. I think they'd make great guests, but they have put together some really amazing educational opportunities at different levels for your universalists. Some of it is for religious professionals about pastoral care for trans folks in congregation. Some of it is just how we change congregational culture to be more welcoming of trans and non-binary folks. I've taken their class as a binary religious professional. It was transformative for me, so it was really helpful. And they even, I guess I can say this, I think it's public, making a module for the Ministerial Fellowship Committee to study to train the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, which is our UU committee that credentials ministers in our movement, to train us in how to meet with and support trans and non-binary ministers in our movement. So I'm very excited. Looking forward to taking another class with them. Jess or Sean, have you taken any of their classes? I imagine you know the folks in.
I did.
Yeah.
I took the religious. Oh, sorry, Sean. I think I
No,
have
you
a
go.
lag. I took the course with them at the beginning of the year, which feels like 10 years ago because it was before COVID lockdown. So it's very dissonant in my mind that was this year. But I took the religious professional one with them, and the congregation that I'm in now took it right as I was starting. I'm not sure if it was inspired by my attendance, if they were planning to do it anyway. I like to tell myself that it was inspired by my attendance and they were prepping themselves. And it felt that way for me. And it felt they had a way to have conversation and be open and understood more. I don't get the questions and the feeling tokenized of you're the one I should check in with this. Like it does have, I'm having not known the congregation before, I can't say that it necessarily made a difference in how they are, but I felt that it did. And I think it was really great. I popped into a few of their sessions and it was really wonderful to hear them have those deep conversations. I was curious what it was like, not from being on the religious professional class. I was curious what the congregational class was like and discussions they might have. And it was wonderful to hear them open up. And it was beautiful to hear their conversations and their rawness and their authenticity and their vulnerability with each other. And I think it really brought them together more as a congregation, especially during this time when they needed that community and that togetherness.
I want to
feel
thank
like you all covered it now.
Well, I want to thank you all. I want to come back to something that somebody put in the chat, but also I know I've been kind of leading this conversation. So I'm going to talk about two things. I start talking and something else comes up. But for me, something that was critical, one, I'm learning a lot about myself, but what was critical for me, somebody used this word last week. They used fellowship as opposed to allyship, as opposed to other words. And I'm really trying to lean in to be a good follower. My friend Aisha over there has barely spoken because she's in that fellowship mode. This is y'all's space and we want to honor that, but the conversation has to be led somewhere. So, I'm trying to fight that, not to speak up and not to speak over, and also to like make sure you all feel safe and comfortable. So there's like a lot of hosting going on here. But I'm not upset about that though. But I want to just what are some ways that folks can lean into followership? What are ways that folks can follow the lead of trans folks, follow the lead of Black trans people, of brown trans people? What are the ways that we can use what we know to be true about our 7 principles and be in alignment and follow the voices? Whose voices should we be following? How do we follow those voices, and how do we be good followers? Because I like ally, I like accomplice, and all of those big words. But at the end of the day, if I'm only doing what feels safe and comfortable for me and not what makes you all thrive, I'm not doing the right work. So I guess, work with that. Mold it, play, do it easy.
Well beyond transness, UUs need to learn to be good followers, because where the most microaggressions and painful things come up for me is people who want to tell me that they know more about being trans than I do, or they know more about, when I have a t-shirt that I wore at Pride that says God is trans and so am I, and they need to tell me everything they've thought, felt, heard about that. I use the G word, but also about claiming transness as something sacred. And when you come in from the perspective of an expert on something, that's actually superiority. And it happens all over the place. So the best thing to do is just get curious, to practice your followership skills. There are lots of amazing trans people in the world and in Unitarian Universalism to learn from, and to look for what they've already done. Don't come and act like you're the only person that has ever had this question. Go looking for the answers and try to find them on your own. That's also part of being a good follower, is informing yourself. So I just love that idea, and I love it much more broadly than just trans issues. But if you didn't know that tomorrow is Trans Day of Remembrance and you don't know what that is, you have all the resources you need on your phone, let alone in your computer or in the world or in a book, to learn about it, to find out the story of every one of those people who died, to face it squarely. So, and then go looking for the beautiful trans women of color, especially, who are thriving and leading and showing up all over the place, in media, in our religious movements, in on TV, in the entertainment. There's a lot of beautiful, amazing people teaching, really teaching by living, and you can learn from that.
I don't have a lot to add, Sean. You put that wonderfully. The librarian side of me, there are so many books, and it's okay to read picture books. It's okay to read books written for children and youth, especially when that's where your mindset is in relearning things. I know this came up from talking about the Common Read last year. I was like, I chose the young people version because that's where my mind needs to start. It needs to relearn these things from that basic level. So, and there are so many beautiful picture books, and those are amazing and wonderful, and especially share them with children and youth. And then also, I just received my copy finally. I'd been saving for it, the Black Trans Prayer Book, and it's beautiful, and they have some beautiful things in it.
I think it's also important to say that, like, when you're looking at books, when you're looking for books, like I loved, Sean, that you had your congregation read Centering alongside White Fragility, so that you were not letting them learn about racism just from a white person. So I think that we need to make sure that we are reading books by trans and non-binary people, and by Black and brown trans and non-binary people, and that our children are too. And so, we can probably shout out some names, but I want to lift up Flamingo Rampant as a trans owned and operated small independent publishing company who produces children's books, and not all of them are like going to win a Caldecott medal or whatever, but they're lovely books about diverse people. They're people of all colors and abilities and language backgrounds and gender expressions in their books on purpose. And they do just do a lovely job. And just to have those books on the shelf for kids to like be able to take down and read is meaningful. Sean?
Yes, I want to also lift up Flamingo Rampant, and that they have a Kickstarter right now for their new year of books, and they're specifically written and illustrated so that being trans or Black or whatever the main character isn't the problem in the books. And that's one of the things I love about them. So a character will be trans, but they'll be trans and they'll be talking about other things in their life and doing other things and just living life. So right now is a good time because things have been so hard to support them and to give them some real fiscal support. So thank you for bringing them up.
Yeah, and like, independent small book publishing company that has to do a Kickstarter every year for their for their they release a batch of books every year, and they do a Kickstarter every year, and you can get their entire season of books in the Kickstarter. And just I buy one for me, for my kid, and I buy one for my congregation's library every year through that.
Well, family, we are. Oh, sorry, Michael. Do you want to speak? All right.
No, I was going to do exactly what you're going to do right now, Kia.
So you keep talking.
So we're coming to the top of our hour, and we want to end with a moment of silence, to hold a full minute of silence in memory of the people whose lives have been taken this year. There are numbers out there, 35, 45, 55. It's, 400 all around the world if you look at the whole list of people all around the world. So we're going to hold a moment of silence and end it with a prayer. My chime is upstairs, or I would ring it now. Sean, would you mind offering us a prayer as we come out of our silence?
Spirit of life and love, of power and joy, we remember. We take time to notice, to honor, to be with our grief at the loss of these lives, transgender lives, mostly transgender lives of color. And as we notice, we are recommitting ourselves to the work of justice and love, compassion, acceptance that will help us not have to count so many names next year and in the future. May we make this personal. May we make a space in our community that is life-saving, life-giving space. May we make space in our hearts to learn, to follow, to lead, to be a community that is celebrating life, celebrating the lives of trans and non-binary people, of all people who give themselves to the world honestly, with integrity and wholeness. May it be so. May we be the ones that make it so. Amen. Ashe, and blessed be.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Sean. This has been The View. I don't know who's on next week. We're flying by the seat of our pants this season on The View. Do you know who's on,
No
Quiana?
VUU next week. It's Thanksgiving.
No VUU. Oh,
It's food day. It's day of mourning. It is. We are not having the VUU next week. We
that's
are
right.
off.
No VUU next week. We'll see you in 2 weeks when we're feasting on leftover pie. Be well, my friends. Be safe.
Thank you, friends.
Thank you.
You don't have to leave. Tanner's gonna